Welcome to Divine Justice. In order not to miss the videos prepared by our team, including the latest developments and special reports on the war in Israel, you can subscribe to our channel, like our videos, and click the super thanks button below. Iran's involvement of proxy militias in the war between Israel and Hamas has widened the scope of clashes in the Middle East. Tehran has been supporting Hezbollah in southern Lebanon to launch attacks on northern Israel, while using other proxies in Syria and Iraq to carry out its plans against U.S. bases. In recent days, the Iranian-backed Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, under directives from Tehran, has escalated the flames of war in northern Israel. In response, the United States and Israel today announced an unthinkable move to counter Iran's strategies. The Iranian-backed Hezbollah had recently launched drone and missile attacks from southern Lebanon against northern Israel. However, the IDF announced that it was making moves for a jet response to these attacks by Hezbollah. In other words, the Middle East has witnessed a series of critical attacks by Israel and the United States against Iranian proxy militias in recent days. Let's start with the Israeli offensive operations that have deeply shaken the pro-Iranian Hezbollah. The Israel Defense Forces reported that fighter jets struck several Hezbollah arsenals and positions in southern Lebanon in response to recent rocket and missile attacks on the border. The targets struck included numerous technological resources, including intelligence structures belonging to Hezbollah. The IDF also announced that it struck a target near the Biranit camp in southern Lebanon. This unit contained Hezbollah's weapons depot. The IDF even released footage showing the massive explosion that followed the airstrike on the Hezbollah arms depot in southern Lebanon. The IDF airstrike came in response to Hezbollah rocket fire on northern Israel. The timing of these latest Israeli strikes on the Lebanese borderlines was quite remarkable. The last time Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah appeared before the media for the second time since the beginning of the war. In addition to its attacks against the pro-Iranian Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, Israel also carried out activities against their structures in Syria. Syrian media outlets reported that Israel carried out airstrikes in the central province of Homs in the early hours. The IDF confirmed that it struck Hezbollah targets in the Syrian province of Homs, following a drone strike that it said was fired from Syria at the Red Sea city of Eilat. In this latest IDF strike, 7 Hezbollah combatants were neutralized. Israel had previously carried out strikes against pro-Iranian logistics networks at the Aleppo and Damascus air bases, forcing the closure of these 2 airports. However, despite Israel's harsh response, Iran was still using proxy militias, especially in countries like Syria and Iraq, in order to draw the United States into this chaos. Within the scope of Iran's policies, the U.S. and coalition troops have been attacked at least 40 times by Iranian-backed forces in Iraq and Syria in recent weeks. Following the latest attacks by Iranian-linked proxies against its bases in these 2 countries, the U.S. has taken retaliatory action. For the third time in less than 3 weeks, the U.S. military targeted locations in Syria that Washington says are linked to Iran, which supports various armed groups that Washington blames for a spike in attacks on its forces in the Middle East. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said the United States struck 2 Iran-linked sites in Syria in response to attacks on its forces. The U.S. strikes against Iranian sources in Syria were carried out against a training facility and a base near the cities of Al-Bul Kamal and Mayadin, respectively. U.S. sources reported that the first strike targeted a training camp run by pro-Iranian militias west of Al-Bul Kamal in Deir ez-Zor province. The other U.S. strike took place near a bridge close to the Iraqi border near the city of Mayadin, a stronghold of pro-Iranian militias, the sources said. The 2 strikes are seen as a clear U.S. warning to Iran. In fact, the message Washington wants to send is that Iran should now pursue a careful political and military strategy in the Middle East. However, Tehran supports Hamas in the war between Israel and Hamas and provides arms and military ammunition to the Hezbollah organization which is involved in this war from southern Lebanon. Despite all these, the United States never breaks its cooperation and support relationship with Israel. This is not the first time the United States has targeted the sources of Iranian-linked groups in Iraq and Syria. Recall that the U.S. targeted a Tehran-linked weapons storage site in Syria. U.S. forces also struck 2 facilities in Syria that the U.S. said were used by Iran and its affiliates. Washington's assessment was that none of the previous strikes had resulted in casualties. Washington says that all these strikes are aimed at deterring attacks in Iraq and Syria, which since October 17th have resulted in more than 45 attacks on U.S. forces and dozens of injuries to U.S. personnel. As we all know, the increase in attacks by Iranian-linked proxy militias against U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria in recent weeks is linked to the war between Israel and Hamas. So what is Iran's policy on this issue right now? Iran has made it clear that it has no stake in the realization or implementation of these treacherous plans in the Middle East, and Tehran did not consider it appropriate in the current circumstances to support Hamas by launching full-scale hostilities against Israel. On the other hand, they also denied supporting and arming Hezbollah. But recent events in the Middle East prove the opposite. Recent events show that Iran is much more involved in the war and wants to establish a system of domination in this region. But the recent speech of the pro-Iranian Hezbollah leader, although anti-American and anti-Israel, did not meet Hamas's expectations. Hostilities will therefore be limited to the latest artillery and rocket fire on the Lebanese-Israeli border and Iranian drone attacks on U.S. stations in Syria and Iraq. A second front open war with Israel was considered a last resort due to the uncertain and ambiguous circumstances. The speech was undoubtedly a disappointment for the Hamas leadership, which has been secretly and openly pressing for active support for Hezbollah. The United States, on the other hand, has repeatedly stated that its unconditional support for Israel will always continue. In this chaotic environment in the Middle East, Iran is expected to eventually exhaust its forces and will no longer be able to use the Hamas-Hezbollah militias against Israel. This is because the military power of the United States of America and its commitment to and support for Israel is also embraced by Western Europe. In other words, in addition to the United States, Israel is supported by countries such as the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and Norway. But this support network has been spearheaded by the Washington administration. In short, with such a large circle of support on Israel's side, Iran has little chance of managing its strategies, neither in northern Israel, nor in Gaza, nor in Iraq and Syria.